Hi, this is Tim Donner with another edition of LNTV. So, the sixth Democratic presidential debate is in the books amidst a backdrop of impeachment fever growing among Democrats. This race has changed. And joining us to talk about how and why is LibertyNation.com political columnist Joe Schaefer. Welcome, Joe.
Hello, Tim.
Okay, good to have you on board as usual. So, this was the first debate where Liz Warren went in as the front runner. So she was the predictable subject of most of the attacks. Did the attacks hit home, do you think? And how well do you think she handled them?
I don't think they necessarily damaged her to a large extent, but it's a good sign of what's going to come in the future. We're starting to see some stories in the press now that are targeting her billionaire donors. You know, she's so anti all the billionaires, and then it turns out she's had, I think a story today said 30 billionaire donors during the course of her career in the Senate and in Congress. So it's going to be things like that, and we'll see how she handles real, getting under the microscope. I just think they scratched the surface at the debate, and so it didn't damage her, but we'll see how she handles it going forward.
Do you think that Bernie Sanders, who looked actually pretty fit and trim for a guy who just had a heart attack at 78 years old, he looked pretty good in the debate, do you think he's going to use what you just said, all of Liz Warren's billionaire donors, to try and drive a wedge between himself and the other most popular progressive candidate? He already laid the groundwork for it in an interview before the debate when he said that, you know, there is a difference between him and her. She is a capitalist to the bone and he is not.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is right up Bernie's alley. And I think he's going to make some good hay out of it, to tell you the truth. He did look healthy in the debate. I think he was a winner of the debate just because he was able to get through it and looking good. He didn't look too gray and pallid. I still think it's going to be a huge problem for him going forward. He's a 78-year-old man who had a major heart incident. And, you know, can he keep up the stamina to attack Elizabeth Warren? That is the question. She's definitely vulnerable. But, you know, it's a tough schedule. It's a tough slog running for president. And I'm still not convinced that he's out of the woods. I think that his campaign is going to have these health questions going forward for quite some time, and that helps Elizabeth Warren to take some of the heat off her, because he can most effectively point out her flaws with the money crowd in the Democratic field.
Well, Elizabeth Warren has been the recipient of three political gifts in recent days, Joe. First, Joe Biden's problems with Ukraine, which just continue to grow and multiply, with his son saying he didn't do anything wrong, but he won't do it ever again anyway. So Biden is weakening by the day. And then Bernie has his heart attack. And then Bernie says, well, she's a capitalist, I'm a socialist, really, is what he said. And that kind of gives her some cover, doesn't it, to say she's not this radical socialist that they're saying. So she's had an awful lot of political gifts, but now that she's really the front runner and the target, the bullseye's on her, I guess the question is whether she can transform from a distant voice talking about just how unfair America is to a front-running political candidate. Can she run a campaign of a front runner to nail down the nomination, which it seems to me is hers to lose at this point?
Yeah, I think at this point, I think it's still going to change. I don't believe in her as she is the front runner, but I don't believe she's running away from anybody at this point. Her main flaw, her major weakness is her phoniness. She does come across as a phony, the Pocahontas thing, obviously, but she is very much like Joe Biden in 1988, where she just creates this narrative of her life that isn't true. And so now if she's the front runner and she keeps making up these stories that are easily disproven about her being fired from her job when she was pregnant, there was something about her family that wasn't true, that stuff's going to catch up to her. And also, I think in a Democratic primary, her phoniness with the money, with the billionaire dollars and stuff. Yeah, Bernie gave her cover about not being a socialist, but does that help her in a Democratic primary? Being a socialist helps you in a Democratic primary, unfortunately. So and I think in the larger picture, she is a phony. She's a phony on the money. She's a phony on the stories of her own life and her Native American heritage. She's the front runner. I think it's easy to expose her phoniness, and we'll see how she can deal with that.
So what do you really think, Joe? You know what these presidential debates and a presidential race does is it puts people under the magnifying glass, but never like you're put under the glass and under the magnifier as when you become the front runner. So Joe Biden went under the magnifying glass as the front runner, and he's wilting under the sort of discovery about his background. The question is whether Elizabeth Warren can stand the newfound scrutiny she's going to get as the front runner. But I'll ask you a question. If not Elizabeth Warren at this point, who?
You're asking me something I have no answer for. This is an incredibly weak and mediocre field. And I thought the answer really was, I wrote in an article that Human Rights Campaign CNN event was a fascinating portrayal of who's really calling the shots in this Democratic field. And it is not the presidential candidates. For them to bring out a 9-year-old transgender child like that and ask that question to Elizabeth Warren, putting her in just a horrible position if you're really trying to win a general election. If we're calling Elizabeth Warren the front runner, and you do that, her staffers had to know it was coming. These things are tightly scripted. There's no big surprises at these televised town halls, and they still allowed that to happen. And you have to ask why. To me, it's because they're not calling the shots. None of these Democratic candidates are that powerful. And so someone else is driving the bus. To me, it's these progressive radicals who want to norm these radical talking points, want to bring it into the mainstream. It seems to me almost they're willing to sacrifice the 2020 election to do that, even though it means re-electing Donald Trump, the man they supposedly hate more than anything in this world. It's a fascinating dynamic, I think.
I think the biggest problem for the Trump campaign at this point is trying to sift through all the explosive material that they can use on whoever the Democrat is, and sift through it and pick the best of such a rich lot of stuff that's going to scare the bejesus out of the American people. You and I have been talking about this for ages. So, quick question, quick answer. Did this debate change anything in the race?
Absolutely not. I think it was the most dull of the debates so far, and that's saying something. The American people have kind of tuned out on this anyway after the second or third debate, and then they went on for 3 hours the other night. I couldn't watch the whole thing, and I'll tell you, the moment I turned off was when they talked about gun control, said nothing new, the same things they've been saying on and on. I turned it off. I turned it back 5 minutes later. They're still talking about gun control.
Of course they were.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, they're just reshuffling things, saying things that the Syria conversation was brutal because it was just, again, them reacting to the 24-hour news cycle. I didn't see anything in depth there. There was nothing serious. And frankly, they came across as very establishment, which is not what the Democratic Party, it's not a good look for them. Everyone except for Tulsi Gabbard came across as very establishment, in my opinion. So they're a mess. These debates are actually only making it worse for them. They need to get down to some voting and culling some of these weak candidates. Like I said, they're all weak, but they need to get down to some voting and stop talking so much.
All right, Joe, I look forward to doing this again next week and hopefully most every week as we head towards the 2020 election. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks a lot.
And thank you for joining us. We hope that you enjoyed this, maybe learned a thing or two, and we really hope that you will like and subscribe to our channel. You can do it right down there in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. And we'll see you next time on LNTV.